what do you think, or what are you attributing this increase in young male suicide to?
You've talked about the sedation.
Male sedation hypothesis.
Yeah, which I find very interesting, which is obviously it's about drugs, but it's also about pornography and video games. And I think it's consistent with this idea of a retreat and a kind of pulling away from the difficulties and challenges of modern society. I think that's number one. And it's very interesting if you look at drug poisonings, which is separate from suicide. One of the reasons that's risen so much among men, and perhaps we can talk a bit about that, is because the sorts of drugs that the men are taking, they are very often taking them on their own. So there's no one there to revive them. These are not party drugs. These are not the drugs that the kids were taking when you were doing your job as a bouncer, right? This is not, let's take this and go out and have a good laugh. These are drugs of retreat. And my sense is that among many young men, they don't feel that sure about the extent to which they are needed and valued. And in the end, that seems to be the best predictor in the end that someone will take their own lives, is that they have come to believe that the world will be better off without them, or that they're kind of not needed. I think one of the best protectors against losing your life to suicide is a real clarity that the world needs you. Right? That your absence from the world will be bad. And increasingly, I think particularly young men without much economic power, perhaps not quite sure where to go, what to do end up being unconvinced that the world is actually better off with them than without them. I think that the state of feeling unneeded is literally fatal. Through drugs, through suicide, etc., and also just like any society where anybody ends up feeling like we're not sure we need you, that you might be a bit surplus to requirements, is just that's the society that's morally failing, and that's the sense that quite a lot of young men have now, which is just this uncertainty. So this would not be particularly kind of young men, but I think it speaks to the issue about neededness, which is that the suicide rate among men is 4 times higher than among women, every age group. But if you look at the specific cohort of divorced men and women, it's 8 times higher among divorced men than divorced women. It doesn't really go up among divorced women, but it really goes up among divorced men. And a plausible explanation for that, I think, is just this sense of like, well, am I needed? Am I connected? Do I have a sort of sense of responsibility and obligation? Am I tied in to some relationships that kind of make it clear?
Well, one of the problems that divorced men have is that their ability to hold on to their social networks, especially when they get married, degrades. Guys just suck at they suck at keeping their friends.
They do. Wifeless men tend to be a bit of a mess.
But when men get married, they let their male friends drop, or their previous single male friends drop. They then absorb the wife's friend groups. We're going around to such and such a person's house.
Yeah.
You kind of become a friend with the husband.
And then you realize when you get divorced that they were her friends all along.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Everybody was linked through the wife, not through the husband. Yeah. So I think this conversation around neededness, you need to be needed, was something I really, really wanted to get into. I think very few times, maybe ever in human history, but certainly in the modern world, has anybody asked the question, what does it mean to be a woman in the modern world? What does it mean to be a woman? Sort of the role is kind of, in many ways, for women, both the mothering side or the career-focused side, sort of, I guess, the two main skews that women have in terms of life direction now. Recent opportunities socioeconomically to be independent financially, to achieve qualifications, to do all of those things. This is a sort of a big, novel, shiny new opportunity that lots of women have got. That's evident. Like, I'm kind of liberated, I'm independent, I'm doing it on my own, I'm sort of chasing after these things. Like, that's you're kind of breaking new ground. It's revolutionary in a way. It's sort of frontiering, pioneering type stuff. And then the other side, which is maybe more typically where women have got their meaning from, it's like, as soon as you are pregnant, I need to raise this creature. I'm a mother. I've got meaning. It's this positive thing back and forth. I'm relationally. I've got I've got other mother. I'm allo-parenting with my sister or my aunties or whatever. And, many men even when they were more important to the running of the family, were kind of cheerily waving from the sideline while the wife raised the kid, especially, first 6 months to a year. Any dad knows that they're kind of just like a spare part that's kind of like a moral cheerleader who's going like, well done, honey. Should I do some toast? Like, is there anything I can do? It's the mother and the child type.
A little bit harder than that.
You know what I mean? That it's very much mother is the MVP and
Sure.
dad is there as the support animal.
That's true. Yes.
My point being that I don't think women have had the what does it mean to be needed conversation now in quite the same way that men have. So I'm asking the question in a very long-winded way, trying to identify why you would have this sexed difference, given that both men and women use social media. Women may be more psychologically affected, women in the 15 to 34 age bracket, more affected by it. The only bits of sort of toxic femininity, I think, that really have been raised up by the modern world has been this sort of relational outcasting, bullying that happens online, etc. I'm trying to work out why that would be sexed and what's happening to men. And I get the sense that women have two very prestigious, very rewarding life paths laid out in front of them right now, whereas men, both of those, the socioeconomic approach and the homemaker approach, have kind of been, they're a little more surplus to requirements in both of those arenas.
Yeah, super interesting. In some ways, you could argue that so let's take neededness.
I love that term.
As this just fundamental need.
I have a role to play.
I have a role to play. And in some cases, like I have a distinct role to play, right? As me, or as a dad, or as a mom and something. And you take the old version of neededness was like the supply of neededness to women was, we need you to raise the next generation, have the kids and raise the next generation. And the supply of neededness to men was, I need you to kind of raise the money, get the money to raise the family and feed the kids and look after them, right? So there are these kind of old supplies of neededness. And what we've done, I think, with women is to add another way in which they're needed, right? And so the message that a lot of young women will get is like, the economy needs you. We need you in science. We need you in STEM. We need you to be leaders.
The role model.
And a role model for the next generation of girls and so on, without really saying, by the way, we also would forget about the kids, right? Because they're like, no, we still need you to do that, by the way. And of course, that's a source,
double shift,
that's a source of complaint among many. But what's clear is that there hasn't been this evacuation of neededness for women and girls. If anything, the message that they're getting is, we need you more than ever, because we still need you to do the old bit.
You can do it all.
And you know to do this bit. Whereas for men, that old form of neededness, which is through the kind of economic provider model, protector model, has been very significantly, and for good reason, but it's been significantly evacuated. And we haven't really added anything to it. And so there's been an expansion of the domains of neededness for women and a contraction in the domains of neededness for men, for all kinds of reasons that we could get into. I think that's then playing out in terms of the different ways in which we see the mental health crisis playing out, and especially for men. The question is then, what do we need men for? And how do we help men kind of feel needed? Mm-hmm. And that's a whole area of, like, around fatherhood, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm passionate about is saying, like, dads matter, men matter, because the reason why you made this point about femininity earlier is you don't really read across history or even recently about a crisis of femininity, but you read repeatedly about a crisis of masculinity. And now that could be like cue eye roll, right? But actually what it's telling us is something incredibly important, which is that the role of men has always been and always will be somewhat more socially constructed and validated because of our different role in reproduction, right? Yeah. Like at some basic visceral level, and I've talked to a lot of female.
You're more of a Swiss Army knife, whereas the woman is a bit more of a sword or a hammer.
Yeah,
like we have a few jobs that we have you and you're.
Well, what it means is that, like, at some basic level, I think it's embodied that women are needed.
I've just got it. Right? I've got it in my head. You'll know this. There's greater male variability, right?
Yeah.
In
males at the tail.
Yes, exactly. There's more male geniuses. There's more males with disabilities. There's more male billionaires. There's more that are in jail at the same time and homeless and all the rest of it. This is like a social role, cultural equivalent of this, that there is greater male variability in the role that they're going to take. You're going to be the protector provider. You're going to be the warrior. You're going to be the diplomat. You're going
Over
to
time,
be
you mean.
yes,
different periods of time.
smeared
Yeah,
across
absolutely.
time. You're going to be the person that maybe considers taking their own life. You're going to,
Right.
there's more
Yeah.
of that variability too.
Well, I think that that's right. The definition of mature masculinity has really shifted a lot in exactly the way that you describe it, right? And so one of the things I kind of point out is that actually physical competence, the ability to kind of be a good fighter, well, actually in many parts of human history, that was incredibly important, right, for kind of men, and it's actually just not as important anymore. Certainly not in my world.
It's been outsourced
Right.
to law enforcement. Police.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly in lots of jobs now, it would, and like being in a Brookings seminar and really having a great right hook just doesn't really help, right?
Brawn-based to brain-based.
Just doesn't help. And so what do we valorize instead? They say, well, in that case, you want earnings or intelligence, and then it's something else altogether. But there is this term, we may have talked about this before, but this term cognitive self-complexity. Have you come across that?
No.
I think you'll like this. And so basically what this is, this idea of cognitive self-complexity is that your view of yourself has multiple sources. So it's complex, right? So yourself has multiple sources of meaning. Is basically the idea. And if you look at surveys where you kind of ask women, what do they get meaning from? What are their sources of meaning? It's much broader than for men. And so women are able to kind of draw on, well, the sense of meaning I get from being a mom, the sense of meaning I get from being a friend, the sense of meaning I get from being a daughter, the sense of meaning I get from being a professional, kind of in the workplace, etc. And the idea here is that actually it's like having a balanced portfolio, is that actually you're not putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of your identity. So you've had a terrible day at work, but okay, you're still important to your kids as a mom. You can be there for your friends, etc. Whereas with men, they're still putting a lot of their eggs in the basket around work and economic provision.
Yeah, they've got this sort of conceptual inertia around what they did previously.
A little bit, and it's a bit of a lag there. And so what it means, number one, is that if men lose their jobs, it hits them much harder psychologically because that's still very central to their identity. But it also means they don't have quite that same ability to flex, that self-complexity, to just actually lean more into their role as, say, a friend or a father, even if they're sucking at work.
Yeah.
That weighs so heavily for them. And there's a lot we could learn there, I think.
We'll get back to talking to Richard in 1 minute, but first, I need to tell you about Factor. If your fall schedule leaves no room for meal prep, Factor has got you covered. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat them and enjoy. You can skip the extra trips to the grocery store, plus all of the chopping and prepping and cleaning up, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality that you need. And right now, their autumn menu has a few of my favorite dishes, like their pumpkin sage chicken and smoked Gouda mac and cheese. If you're struggling to hit your protein goals every day, their Protein Plus meals have 30 grams of protein per serving. This fall, get Factor and enjoy eating without any of the hassle. Right now, you can get 50% off by going to the link in the description below or heading to factormeals.com/MW50 using the code MW50 at checkout. That's factormeals.com/MW50 and MW50 at checkout. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Richard, you will love the full-length 3-hour-long conversation, which is available just here. If you press it.